Grab your pencils, Democrats. Today is the last day for Biden supporters to convince folks in New Hampshire to write in the name Joe Biden after Joe took his name off the ballot to prioritize the race in South Carolina. You follow that? The Secretary of State's office says as long as the intent of the name is clear, the vote will likely count for Biden. We're not sure if the big guy or Corn Pop was a bad dude will make the cut. But it's a fun little way to make sure Biden wins the primary and avoid an embarrassing loss to Democratic challenger Dean Phillips.
Sadly, it's going to demonstrate that our incumbent president is unelectable and weak. And I think it's going to show this country that there's a candidate here who can actually do what has been promised for generations.
I think Joe Biden's a good man, but to your point, he's not standing in front of the press. He's not here meeting voters. He's not answering questions. He's not doing town halls, and he won't do debates. I think he's a good man. I don't think he has a cognitive issue, but he's 81 years old. He's in decline.
Meanwhile, recent polls indicate that black voters are souring on Biden over issues like the economy, but Jim Clyburn wants to blame that on misinformation.
I'm concerned with the reporting of this. Yes, when I see those numbers, my goodness, if there's any truth to the numbers, which I don't believe them, because I talk to black people all the time. I don't know where those numbers are coming from, but when you ask a question and someone is basing their opinion on incomplete information or misinformation, there's a lot of misinformation going on out here. There are a lot of things being said that's just not true.
You know, I also talk to black people all the time, i.e. Harold. Do you actually believe that it's misinformation?
I don't. I take polls for when you see a poll, you gotta, if you don't believe it that it may be right, you got to look at the particulars of it. I think that poll is probably accurate. I do think that once you get into a joint race between Trump and Biden, maybe those numbers change a bit. But I think we ignore those numbers at our own peril. We've said on this show for many times, and I have, like, I think if 6 months from today the economy is better, consumer sentiment is improving, and it is improving right now, if it continues on this path, any incumbent president would be in a much better position as they head into a general election. If gas prices, I think that is a big moniker. Where that is on Memorial Day will have a big say, or I should say is an indicator of what may happen in the election. But it is, I think, short-sighted and maybe misguided. And I think President Obama has even shared with President Biden that he's got to think about this thing more seriously, and the campaign has got to be more agile and got to be more substantive and speak to these voters. This is the right way to lose these voters. The correct way to go about this is to believe the poll and to craft a strategy to help reverse those numbers.
Judge, so there's this whole write-in effort. Do you think Joe forgot that he was behind this change at the beginning and he doesn't remember?
I'm so glad you asked me that question, Craig, because here's the deal. Joe Biden decides he wants to change the rules. For 100 years, New Hampshire has been the first state in the presidential primary, okay? So Joe gets his pals at the DNC to change the rules. You know the DNC, they're the ones who, like, helped Hillary along and got rid of Sanders. You remember this, right?
You mean
Harold, but that's not a question. That's just, it's rhetorical, okay? So he directs the DNC to change the rules so South Carolina goes first. Why? Because South Carolina is where he wins with Jim Clyburn, and according to this guy Phillips, if you're 81 and in decline, Clyburn's 83 and in decline, that might explain why he doesn't understand the polls. So he directs the DNC to have South Carolina go first, but then he says, oh my gosh, since New Hampshire has a state law which requires that they go now, he says, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we get people to write me in, so I don't lose to Williamson and Dean Phillips. So people in New Hampshire are saying, poor Joe, the DNC changed it. New Hampshire won't go along. No, Joe changed it. So here we go. The DNC says no delegates will be awarded based on what happens in New Hampshire. And Biden is unwilling to debate. He doesn't even want to be in New Hampshire. He's not going to go there. He wants to be coronated. And we know what happened the last time the last Democratic candidate wanted to be coronated, that be Hillary. So anyway, as it relates to Clyburn, okay, if you're under 50, 32% of the blacks are with you. And if you're over 50, 65% are with you. And that's a real problem for Joe Biden. I don't think he's going to do as well as he thinks he's going to do in South Carolina.
Jesse, so Joe's asking people to write in his name, perhaps because that's what Jill does on his name tag in case he ever gets lost. What are
Very
you going to
good.
be filling in Joe Biden's name when you vote?
No, in the interest of full transparency, my uncle is in charge of the write-in for Biden campaign here in New Hampshire. He's a Democrat, you guessed it, state senator here. And I just got off the phone with him, and he said they had to do it because the rule is in the state constitution. They have to have a primary. The DNC made a dumb decision, and they just wanted to show their support for Joe Biden. So they raised money for signs and for all the grassroots efforts. I say, is this thing going to be close? Is he barely going to put away this Dean character? And he goes, I don't care. If he wins by one vote, it's fine with me. And Greg, I also talk to black people too, and Harold tells me that black Americans are not happy with Joe Biden. The only thing that they've delivered to the black community is illegals.
Oh, there you go.
I got to write that down.
Last word to you, Dana. Writing in my name, is that effective campaigning?
It's actually a good idea. I mean, why not? Give it a shot. Gutfeld is easy to spell. Interesting, I heard today from this guy we had on Newsroom. His name is Nick LeVake, and he's part of the New Hampshire Institute of Politics. And apparently when they first put out the advertisement about doing the write-in campaign, they spelled Biden's name wrong. Which might be why you could just mark an X and they'll be like, okay, cool, that's for Biden. It is embarrassing for Biden to have to do this. He listened to the far-left members and the activists of his party who said New Hampshire is just too white. What's interesting is that New Hampshire has a lot of history, one, we've already established that, but there are many college-educated white people who live in New Hampshire, and that is making up a big part of the president's base, so he should want to make sure that they are happy. I do think Biden might eke it out, but we're talking about how New Hampshire can often surprise. Maybe the surprise isn't on the Republican side this time around. It could be on the Democratic side. So I'll be watching that and Bill Hemmer at the billboard tomorrow.
All righty then. Coming up, Joe Biden makes a stunning admission on the open border.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.